So we have a local news story here which I don't normally comment on, but it speaks to national property rights and the rights of American citizens, of this St. Louis couple who watched a mob smashing the gate to their private property and coming on to their private lawn. So the story goes to great lengths to emphasize how this couple were the villains in St. Louis. This couple are the enemy. This is how Jeremy Kohler of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch frames his story. This couple had been watching week after week after week of this. Angry protests nationwide in city after city, where rioters, looters, and murderers were burning block after block after block, destroying the cities and demanding that the police departments be defunded. His intent was, in making this story, was to investigate the couple defending their property. That's right. They have a legal right to defend their property. This reporter said to himself, I'm going to investigate every last detail about this couple here in St. Louis and find ways to attack them and impugn their integrity. When Black Lives Matter protesters marched up Kings Highway and turned through an iron gate, they did not turn through an iron gate. They smashed a lock on the gate of a private residence, private property. They broke into an iron gate. When Black Lives Matter protesters marched up, so let's take a look at the crowd here. They put a half dozen token African Americans at the front of the crowd. But look behind them. Almost every person in this march is Caucasian. So the news media is very careful to say that African American protesters are being threatened with guns by a white couple. Look at the actual photo, and hey, guess what? It's a protest march of multicultural, diverse people, but it is majority white. So the news media has their angle, and they want to drive it home. Now, that's not enough for this reporter. Reporter says the couple was asserting their white privilege. Ah, interesting. No, it's the privilege that any American enjoys of gun ownership, thanks to our Second Amendment to the Constitution, which was envisioned by our founding fathers for precisely this sort of situation. Not for target practice, not for hunting birds. Our Second Amendment exists when a tyrannical government does not protect our home, health, and property. This couple, who had their firearms recently seized by the police department of St. Louis, could not depend on the St. Louis Police Department to come defend their home. The St. Louis Police Department was ordered by the civilian administration to stand down. The police department of St. Louis was nowhere to be found. These homeowners who pay taxes to fund a police department had no one to count on. Public records and interviews reveal a fuller picture than emerged 2 weeks ago. They show the McCluskeys are almost always in conflict with others, typically over control of private property. This is a flawed premise from the start, and any decent news editor at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch could have told this reporter this. All of his investigations are pointless. It doesn't matter if this couple had one lawsuit defending private property rights, or if they file 50 lawsuits an hour. What was St. Louis Post-Dispatch reporter Jeremy Kohler actually looking for? I would contend that what he found for this story, I would contend that this was not his goal in researching their personal lives. Jeremy Kohler looked into the lives of this couple, hoping to find that they were Trump supporters. He hoped to find that these two donated to Donald Trump, that they supported Donald Trump, that they spoke out in support of Trump's administration and his policies, that they walked around wearing Make America Great Again hats. These were the things that this newspaper and this reporter were looking to expose, that these people supported President Trump and were therefore evil. However, as you can see here, This is just an ordinary power couple of lawyers. So the reporter didn't have his angle. So he went back to his editor and said, I didn't find any evidence that these are Trump supporters. What do I do now? And the St. Louis Post-Dispatch editor said, well, let's move away from having this as a local news story and just make it a national referendum story where we attack them for daring to defend their property. We'll make it a story about white privilege, even though there's absolutely no proof of that. We'll make it a story about the protesters having peaceful intentions, even though there's absolutely no proof of that. And we will do everything we can to make an example of this couple for daring to prove the NRA right and President Trump right. And that crime is unforgivable. And then the reporter said, you got it, boss. I will destroy this couple's lives. Look at her face. This is a woman that was just enjoying her lunch and had a mob smash their way through her gate to do God knows what to her and her family. And she and her husband had every right to defend themselves. Although I would probably suggest they take an NRA gun safety course on how to properly hold weapons, how not to point weapons at anyone unless you plan to use them, and also to have muzzle awareness. The husband repeatedly swept his wife's midsection with his rifle muzzle. But look at what the news media does to an innocent couple who committed no crime and defended their property from an angry, violent mob. The news reporter had his angle before he even started the story. The angle was that the couple were enemies and that the angry, violent mob are the reporter's friends. Let's say that reporter Jeremy Kohler and his news editor at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch had this mob smash their way onto their private property to loot, to burn, to kill, to do who knows what to Jeremy Kohler and his family, or the editor's person and his family. Would they still have the same attitude, the same negative attitude about personal property rights? I'm guessing that the staff at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch would have a sudden change of heart and would suddenly be all in favor of defending their personal property, and they'd also prefer to have a police department immediately respond to defend their home, which this couple was denied. Thank you.